Welcome, family. Welcome on this beautiful Thursday afternoon. Today, we are talking about the capability to own and profit off of our own community. And we're going to take a look at how we've been robbed of that in this society. And also, we're going to look at how everything basically is a distraction from our true reality and our truth. But first, let's look at how we've been bamboozled. We live in this, what they call democracy, but I wonder if it ever occurred to anyone that we were allowing them to determine for us what is good for us and what is bad for us. I wonder if we really ever sat down and saw the truth staring us right in the face of the point that we were really just being used in this society so that they can have their communists or their community be supported by our downfalls. I know a lot of people can't see that because a lot of people are in a Disney mind frame. You may wonder, why did Van Jones get all that money? Well, he said why he gave Van Jones that money. He needs Van Jones to go out and do the job that he's always been doing for his people. Lied to us. So, and convince and get other people to convince. He needs and would like certain things to be done, basically. So, when we look at America's communism, we as Nubian people or people of hue don't really grasp the whole idea behind communism. Communism isn't a bad thing. It's kind of like what I was saying years ago about what is good for them is bad for us. What is bad for us is good for them. Communism, we've allowed them to define what communism is for us here in this country. Many Black people here, many Nubian people, correction, here in America we have allowed people who only have our demise as their best invested interest to define to us our whole world. Hey, Donnie. We've allowed them to define for us our life, or we've allowed them to define what life is, period. And I see what the task really is. We lack the capability, which was all in their name, their plan, right? The capability to own and profit. You have some that own and profit, but it's not on a grand scale where it's going to help the Black community like the white community has been helped by their own. See, it's not going to give us a communist society for Nubian people, which I would say a communism society for us will be a great thing for us, because it will allow us to work together, own, and profit. We'll get back into that circulation of owning and profiting. Right now, we basically are the foundation. We're back into slavery again. We're back in slavery again. We're in a situation where we have to jump through hoops to get seen, to get that raise or to get that promotion. We have to do the extraordinaire. We have to come out of ourselves. But what about a place where we could be authentic, be our authentic self, be around people we knew cared for us deeply, be around people who didn't have any hidden agendas behind our backs. That's what being communion would allow. But as long as we're multicultural and integrated, we're gonna always be the weights are gonna be unbalanced. Because you can't be on both sides. You can't be on both sides in this situation. Because one is for hating you, and that's a natural hate, and one is for helping you to flourish. You're either going to hate the one that wants to help you to flourish, and you're going to love the one that's keeping you stagnant. And that is just evident, also evident today. But people don't know no other way of life but the way of life you've been introduced to. So some people think that this is normal, and they think it's business as usual for them. The wealth has been blocked from being passed down. Even if you're in an interracial family situation, they are going to do everything in their power not to get it to the Black part of the family. So when you say multicultural, do you know there are countries where there is, like, I could say like Latin countries, like they call themselves Latinos. We got white Latinos and we have the Black Latinos, right? Well, they weren't always white Latinos. They became that way through mixing, generations and generations mixing. A lot of them are still related to a lot of the Black Latinos. So do you think multicultural in that situation made things balanced? No. Just like here in America, There's only one group of people that have the capability to freely own and profit. And then they allow others, as you know, nothing has ever changed. Because this has always been a thing where foreign people could come over and take our lands, come over and interrupt Black Nubian ways of life, and take over our little communities we had left. So it's always been something to come and intervene in our strives. It's always been something, from gentrification, redlining, predatory lending, laws been made on the federal level, such as Obama, causing a lot of Black people to lose their homes. Various different things have hindered us as a people from being able to own and profit. Mentally, our people want to shop at Kroger's, who's well-known Jewish slave holders, part of the people who generation of families who profited off of slavery. We still want to shop there than to support Black-owned grocery stores. There's been men, and I think women too, that tried to open up grocery stores, but no support from the Black community. So we're in this never-ending circle or cycle to where we end up harming ourselves and setting ourselves back. But we know it didn't start out that way. Just like the domino effect. The dominoes were all straightened up until someone flickered the finger and knocked it over, right? And caused the collapse. The spiral, downward spiral. The fall. So let me get into a couple of videos for a minute, and then I'll come back and make comment.
A lot of people go to parties on Halloween dressed up in costumes. Right. Is because one of the major mysteries is maybe that they don't want you to know that those ancestors come back, and a lot of times you see people in those costumes, they actually be spirits. Yeah. You see, but remember now, science doesn't want you to believe that there's a spiritual world. You see, there's a spiritual world. They'll even deal with moralism in religion than they will actually deal with spiritual aspect. And I've heard Christians say that the dead know not what the living do. I'm like, no, you got that wrong. Yeah, the living know not what the dead does. You see, right? What the dead does. So the point is, we're talking about some of these costume parties is to hide the fact that what would you do if you up in a party and your grandmama show up and want to party a little bit and take a little sip of some cognac or some Hennessy? You see what I'm saying? You see, so, but now why am I saying that? Why am I saying that? Because the closer we get to this realm, and you can even say the 2012 thing, it's a 2012 cycle or a 2012 season, and we've been in it. I think we've been in it 2012 since 2001. That was the reason why they blew the building up in 2001, the World Trade Center. You understand? Right. Other than doing it now. You see, the point I'm trying to make, as we get closer into these particular realms, what is happening here is, one of these days of the dead, people going to show up and ain't going to leave. Or people going to disappear.
Yes. Well, I think it was earlier this year, Brother Bobby, that the CDC announced its plans, and actually it's on their website, it's on the government website, that what it would do if there was an outbreak in zombies. And on the show, they actually put it out, and people thought it was a joke, but the CDC said no, they were experimenting with some things, and they needed to let people know in case there was a zombie outbreak. You guys may have remembered when.
That's right. Now check this out. You are right. Not only that, the History Channel just put a new series out that started last week on the history of zombies. Yeah. And it's an entire series that they're going to do of certain segments of it. You see what I'm saying? Now, it's interesting here because they also put out this thing called Planet Egypt they did for 2 weeks and did all this Egyptian stuff, but just so happened to leave out the fact that they were black people because they didn't show nobody black in the whole history of Egypt. You see what I'm saying? So they're funny when it comes to that whole thing. They can't get past that. But you are right about this thing here because there's some stuff that's actually happening because it's also in a text. It's also in the text. It's in the text of the descent of Ishtar. Ishtar's descent. Let me see if I can find the name of the book. Like I said, I go in this room. If I don't get them off the stack, you see, it's thousands and thousands of books, and so I was just trying to see because I located, I think it's something Tales from Mesopotamia. But but the only thing you have to do is go on the internet and just type in Ishtar's descent. And Ishtar tells she's trying to go to the underworld. And she says, let me in. Let me into the underworld. I think because what it is she's trying to go. The story is the older one was Inanna's descent. And Inanna's husband is fallen into the underworld, almost like the whole Isis and Osiris thing. And as a result, Ishtar, it's later Ishtar, but earlier it was Inanna. So you can just put Inanna's descent or Ishtar's descent. But I think the one that's made mention is in Ishtar's descent. And so she goes in and says, listen, open up the underworld for me. I need to get in, basically to see her husband, to try to bring him back and whatever. So what happens here is she makes this claim. Now this is the goddess. This is nothing but a Mesopotamian form of Isis. Yeah. So she makes this form. She says, let me in, or I will rip the bolts off of the doors of the underworld, and the dead will walk the earth again and will outnumber the living. You see, outnumber the living. Yeah. You see, so we're really getting into some stuff, and that's why this whole ancestral thing we talk about tonight is very important, because the simple fact here is we've now made contact with the ancestors on the other side, and that is the destiny. I talked about it in the Baltimore lecture, and I'm going to go through this tonight here, because that's what we're talking about, making this contact with the ancestors with the other side. So let me give you some other stuff that's actually happening. You all right?
All right.
Okay.
Yes.
Okay. Now, what you need to do is limit the amount of soy products, because soy now is in everything. It's in toothpaste, chewing gum, all your bread, all your cakes. Everything has soy lecithin in it, or soybean oil. Now, soy is a product that what happens here is you can't just not eat because it's in everything. We just have to, you got to start reading the labels.
Right.
And limit your intake. Because what soy does, they have already called it, they call it a carcinogen. Just like last time we talked, I think, they made the cell phone a carcinogen. Now, anybody know what a carcinogen is? It means it causes cancer.
Yeah.
Well, soy, come to find out, it causes a brain cancer. Or the reason why they are putting soy in everything is because they're trying to attack the pineal gland.
So there you have it. Our pineal glands are being attacked. The whole purpose for what you're seeing. And I'm about to explain it. We are affecting the others. We are affecting the others' living lifespan, being able to reproduce, because we are rising up. But there's a small group of us, well, I should say probably a large group of us, that are unhealthy. And what is happening is what I said and what I was given by the spirits was going to happen was people are going to start getting sick because the planet is changing and rising, and because the ancestors put this in the air. The ancestors have put something in the air. And I did talk about that man had his hand in it, but the ancestors, the gods, like Clash of the Titans, control your ability, their abilities. So as above, so below, I'm the same as the ancestor that's above, down here below. So what we're seeing is, yes, they are fighting for survival at this time. Through manipulation and keeping us in a mundane thinking. So we're thinking what their delusional minds have put out. This is what we're thinking, what their delusional minds have given us. This is what we're thinking. What they have set up in the news and media that's going on, what they put in our minds is going on. There's a stark difference between reality and the illusion. So the illusion is whatever they say, whatever they make. Our truth is contrary to that. Whatever they say, whatever they got going on. So basically, we're connected to the planet. We have a connection, and that connection, not only to the planet, but to everything, has caused all of this. And they know the only way to stop it is through us. Through us. So we have this movie playing right in our faces. But I would have to say, luckily, we're not participating too much. But some are participating. Hold on a second. Hold on a second. I'll be back. That's where I'm going.
You see, they're trying to attack the pineal gland. So you're going to have to limit the amount of soy. The amount of soy because it's a carcinogen, but it causes a brain cancer. You see, it causes a brain cancer. You see what I'm saying? So this is very key on how this thing is going down. Now, let me give you some other information.
Yeah.
Now, this is the key. This is the key. And this is why I think that the secret societies say, well, one day those angels or those gods are going to return, but they're going to return as humans. So let me give you Exhibit A. Let me give you an Exhibit A. So what you have to do, we have to trace them, and guess how you trace them? You trace them through your ancestors. But most people, after they people die, they don't know what the hell happened to them. You see what I'm saying? They don't know what the hell happened to them and stuff like that. Because the church got you so that you don't supposed to believe in nothing. People are scared of their family.
Sure.
Yeah, you loved her when she was living, but now the family, the mama tried to get back in touch with you, and you running down the damn street. You see? So, so what happens here is they make sure that we don't have no mystery of the dead. You see, but yes, they do give you these Day of the Dead cultures, which is the European Day of the Dead is this Hallows Eve. And then also you have the Day of the Dead aspect of Baron Samedi on the 2nd or the 1st of the 2nd in Haiti. But there's Day of the Dead festivals in Mexico and around the world at different times. You see, we just have a national one with Halloween, and thank God for that. You can do what you want. So this is what's happening here with this ancestor thing. Okay, let me give you Exhibit A. Two things happen. Sometime in the spring of the year, my brother called me. He said, I ran into this realm and I saw Mama. Now my brother always could see spirits.
Yeah.
This is my youngest brother. He said it was a guy sitting on the side of his bed down at our house in Mullins. And my mama said that was probably your father. You was a baby. So he was living up in Boston. This was in the 80s, or the late 80s, I think it was the late 80s. He went to church. He and his wife. They broke up in the church. They went up in the church. The entire church stopped and was looking at him. They looked at him, and the preacher had to direct them back to him so he could continue preaching. But they were just looking at him like they saw a ghost, like they saw a god or a spirit. And they was looking at my brother. So he said, man, the whole church was like, oh. So after the service was over, the preacher came down and said, hey, I don't know what you got, man, but you got a high spirit. There's something about you, man. He said, you need to get into some religion. That's the only thing he could tell him. You need to crack down and get into some religion. Because that's the only thing he could tell him and stuff like that, because they don't know nothing about no spirit. But they did notice his presence. Okay. The other week, I'm going in the post office. A guy turned around and go, yo, you got the word in you. I say, I most certainly do. He said, and as you know, it won't be long now. I see you goddamn right. So let me tell you. So my brother ended up in a place this spring with it was like some dimension. And my mother looked at him. He saw my mother, and he was like, she said, what are you doing here? And he said, well, what are you doing here? Anyway, what she was trying to tell him, look, where you done ended up, ain't no physical people or ain't no living people here. It's ascended people. And so he said he talked to her a little bit, and he said they was talking, and he said she had on a trench coat like Columbo. I said, okay. She put the trench coat on to send me a message. Okay. To send me a message. So what happened was, hold on 1 minute.
Okay.
Got to get some damn water. I'm talking so loud. Anyway, so what happened was, she was sending me a message. So she said, I said, I know what that is. I said, you never seen the episode of Supernatural. Supernatural been coming on. They're in their 7th season now. They've been coming on since '05. And Supernatural is the two brothers that go down and they do all kind of stuff with ghosts, do all type of stuff with demons and all types of stuff, you know. So what happened on Supernatural? One of the brothers in I think season 3 or season 4 went to hell. And so what happened was, because they was doing stuff and they was tracking down demons, and I think Lilith pulled one of the brothers down to hell. I think it was season 3 or something like that. So in season 4, on the first show, he wakes up and he breaks out of the graveyard. And so they was like, well, he said, I'm back. And so the people was like, well, hey, how did you get back? How did you get back? And anyway, they had figured out that the only way a person can get pulled out of hell is an angel of the Lord. So by the end of the show, the angel appears, Castiel, and he wears a brown trench coat. So I said, when he said that, he's never seen Supernatural. So, and it comes on, I think, every day at 12 to 1 on TNT. You can catch it every day if you want to. It comes on Friday night at 9 o'clock, the new shows. But all the back shows come on, I think it's like they back to back, either 12 o'clock to 1 o'clock or something like that. It's back to back. They're 2 hours long. So, but you check, they come on every day at TNT. So anyway, he's never seen Supernatural. And I said, oh, I got what it is. She had on the trench coat to send me a message because I watched Supernatural. And I said, do you know, Castiel on Supernatural, he wears a trench coat. Okay. And I said, not only that, she sent a message because she know that I know that Castiel is a real angel in the Bible, and Castiel governs Saturday and Saturn, which is he's a Capricorn angel. And my mother, when she was in the physical world, was a Capricorn. She's a Capricorn. My grandmother's a Capricorn. My grandfather's a Capricorn. My father's a goddamn Capricorn. And you know, so I said, well, she was Capricorn. And all. Baron Sun is a Capricorn, a Saturn angel. And stuff. So I said, so she know that I knew that Castiel was Capricorn. In so many words, I said, either she's turned into a form of Castiel. And this is where we're going with this. This is where the human destiny meets what's going on. Because now we got living people and we can track them. Even your boy, Taylor, he said when his mother got threw out the window, they killed his mother in Nigeria. He said she transcended, and now she is a spirit, a grain spirit in the Orusha kingdom. So if you can track these people are turning into gods. Yeah. You see what I'm saying? And so this is the other thing. The kingdom is with us now. It's the only reason why we don't know about it is for one reason. Our pineal glands are gradually opening up, and once they open up, you're going to find out that the ancestors reside with us now.
Yes.
You see what I'm saying? It's just that we can't see it because our pineal glands are sedated. You see, but once the third eye open, you're going to find out that they're already here. When Troy Davis made the transition, hell, only thing he did is he was like, God damn, I was here all the time. I was just locked up in this world in a prison. You see, and you see, they got a show on now called Once Upon a Time. It aired last Sunday at 8 o'clock on ABC.
I just watched them tonight.
Yeah, on ABC. And they're talking about a world, it's the fairy book world, and the wicked witch said, I'm going to put all y'all in prison. Guess what? She took them. She took them to this world. She took them to the modern world. So she took them to California. She took them to Texas. So they went from the enchanted world to this world. And that's the prison. And they don't even know who the fuck they are. One girl said, I just know that I knew you in another life. I met you before. So that's because the pineal gland is shut down. So now this is the deal. So so what it was is when I started reading and dealing with the whole Castiel thing, I said, well, according to this, my mother is ruling over a whole new kingdom, like a seventh heaven. Okay, I was reading that on Castiel in the Dictionary of Angels by Gustav Davison, the definitive text. Dictionary of Angels, I think it's Dictionary Encyclopedia, hold on. It's the Dictionary of Angels, including Fallen Angels by Gustav Davison, the definitive text. And I said, according to this, my mother is ruling over her own realm. So when I told my brother that, my brother said, well, it's interesting you would say that. He said, because about a year ago, even before she told me about the Castiel thing, he said, interesting you would say that. He said, because about a year ago, he said, I went and saw her again, and she was at a table, and it was a line of people, and she was signing these people up. Like to go into something. I said, well, I'll be shit. I said, I'm glad you didn't tell me before I read the book.
Right.
In the book, I said, because I would have thought I'd been influenced by it.
So the demiurge would like for us to keep going into the light. So if they can catch you off guard, catch you without self-knowledge, get you when your body is not in its healthiest state. The other day, they said Cece was taking the life of majority of the people who died that were Black or Nubian was because the only thing they all had in common was obesity, being over the weight their body is supposed to be. And we have to take in consideration that we don't have this self-knowledge of self, but we must have this. If we have this knowledge, which is the most important knowledge, and they know this, then they couldn't pull this over our eyes.
He said, no. He said, about a year ago, I saw her and she was signing people up. So, a funny thing happened. She had a best friend that just made the transition back here this August. This August. My brother called me and said, Miss Hattie Mildred just died. One of my mama's best friends. She just died. And he said about 45 minutes ago. So I went in to the living room where I got all these altars. And I said, I'm calling. I said, I'm calling on behalf of Hattie Mildred. And I said, Hattie Mildred, I summoned her spirit. I said, now you're going to grab this dog named Anubis, and he's going to take you through this doorway. So you imagine the doorway in your mind. He's going to take you through this doorway. And I said, who am I? I say, I am Bobby Hemmett, son of Glaciria Hemmett. So a few minutes later, a forest came and knocked down another big ass tree across the street, and it fell into this house. And this house is now, they got these houses, they turn them into nursing homes, nursing homes. And it fell into this house and knocked out the lights on that side of the street.
That's what's up, because the one thing that human spirit can feel and come through is wood.
It's wood. Now, it's interesting. Now check this out. So she came and got her best friend, and then with that force, she knocked down that tree. And so I said, well, can people call on you? She said, oh no. I said, well, I got it. You a force, and I said, oh, that's that force knocked down that damn tree. She said, I'm a Saturn angel. There's a book called Saturn, A New Look at the Old Devil. And Saturn comes to chastise. She said, no. She said, no.
All right, family. And for the next video. Hold on. Here we go. This is where I'm sorry, family. Hold on, let me fix this. I'm sharing that, right? Yeah. I don't know how to do that. Okay. This is how religion, this is why religion was given to us, to keep us living a lie, living a fantasy, living an illusion.
I don't want to say twice or for the 100th time what you've or how much you've taken from us. I think you know that. But I hope you go to God with all the guilt, all the bad things you may have done in the past. Each and every one of us may have done something that we're not supposed to do. If you truly are sorry, I know I can speak for myself. I forgive you. And I know if you go to God and ask Him, He will forgive you. And I don't think anyone could say it. Again, I'm speaking for myself, not even bad for my family. But I love you just like anyone else. And I'm not gonna say I hope you rot and die just like my brother did, but I personally want the best for you. And I wasn't gonna ever say this in front of my family or anyone, but I don't even want you to go to jail. I want the best for you. Because I know that's exactly what both of them would want you to do. And the best would be give your life to Christ. I'm not gonna say anything else. I think giving your life to Christ would be the best thing that both of them would want you to do. Again, I love you as a person. And I don't wish anything bad on you. I don't know.
In case you didn't notice, the dominant society has been able to define to us and groom us in the manner that we should think, feel, And B, it's not our truth, but because we're lost, it's been the only thing that we can lean on. It's what they say. But then again, this is a tool for their survival, to make sure that we're docile, calm, not collected, disillusioned, and out of our minds.
If this is possible, but can I give her a hug, please? Please? Yes. Thank you very much.
So basically, this is just an example of how we've given over our power. And because we're not knowledgeable of self, it can be used against us. And we use what has been defined for us. And it's nothing but a weapon. It's been nothing but a weapon to keep you from your power. It's been like a blockage. So, and also to keep you dumbed down and docile to where things like this can be pulled. You can be murdered on the streets. You can be poisoned. You can be just eating anything that's not nurturing to your body, because part of self-knowledge is the understanding of what you can and cannot eat. Listening to your body. Okay. The next video here.
Substantially set in Chicago, where you don't live.
Right.
How did you choose Chicago? How did you find Clyde Ross?
Well, okay, so we can start the last question first, finding Clyde Ross. The historian Burl Satter, who's at Rutgers, wrote an extraordinary book called Family Properties. And Family Properties is a history of redlining and housing in Chicago, set in North Lawndale, particularly about one of the big activist groups, the Contract Buyers League in there. Clyde Ross is mentioned in the book, and a bunch of other people who were alive at the time that Dr. Satter, Professor Satter, published the book, are in that book. But the other thing that's in that book, which is absolutely fascinating, is an Atlantic article from 1972 And that article, I mean, people think my article was on that. I think that article was like 30,000 words. And it's all about the Contract Buyers League and redlining. And Clyde Ross is in that article. I didn't know like Mr. Ross's story at all. So I didn't it wasn't like I went looking. I was, saw in a book and said, I want that guy. But the first thing I did after I finished it was I sent an email to Burl and I said, are any of these people still alive? Do you think any of these people, so I think her book might have came out in like 05. So significant time had passed. Now, I said, do you think any of these people are still alive? And she said, I don't know, but I can put you in touch with Jack McNamara, who's one of the big organizers for the Contract Buyers League. I wrote him. We talked on the phone a couple times. He said, well, I'll go see who's alive. Mm-hmm. And Jack was an angel. Oh, my God. He pulled together a spreadsheet of all the members and what their status was and, whether we could get to children or whether we could get to them. I mean, this was the cause of his life for a while. So the idea that it was going to, still, that somebody was saying it still had resonance was just so... I think it just warmed his heart. And so I went to Chicago. Clyde was, Mr. Ross was one of the people on the list. In fact, he was the first person on the list. And I talked to him, and the first thing he said was, I said, Mr. Ross, where were you born? He said, Clarksdale, Mississippi. And I said, why did you leave Clarksdale? And he said, I wanted the protection of the law. And Mr. Ross has a thick Mississippi accent, so I wasn't sure if I was hearing him right. And I said, why? He said, no, I wanted. He said, I wanted protection of the law. I said, what does that mean? He said, well, when I was in Mississippi, there were no black police officers. There were no black prosecutors, no black judges, no black defense attorneys, no black anything. We were effectively outside of the law. If something happened to us, we had no recourse at all.
He understood that we were in communism. Communism, their word against his. That black man's word against the ruling dominant people, right? So we don't recognize the communism that is put over us, the dictatorship that black people had to live up under for a long time, that we've been living under for a long, long time. While everybody else is celebrating freedom, we remain under a dictatorship.
People could basically do whatever they wanted to us. And then, I asked him how, and he went, right down the list. As he said, his list of losses that he had taken. We read about this sort of thing in books, right? And by the time I got to Mr. Ross, it must have been like the spring of last year. And by then I had been doing quite a bit of research. I had probably about 6 to 8 months of research that I had already put in, just trying to understand housing in Chicago. Nothing compares to somebody actually telling you, in detail how they were ripped off. Mm-hmm. It was extraordinary.
One of the things about the article that I think when you first see the framing, when people think about reparations, they think about slavery.
Right.
Reading the article, slavery is not the moral core of it.
No.
Housing discrimination is primarily.
Right.
And is that why? Is it this idea that slavery, abhorrent as it was actually like sanctioned law? Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. And then after that, America moved into a gray period where we actually had essentially an illegal regime around African Americans.
See, I think that the thing is that after slavery, we had Reconstruction, and we had this period where we tried to make it right briefly. Mm-hmm. We could have made it right, and had we made it right, we wouldn't be having this discussion at all. You're right. Slavery is to the back in the story, but housing discrimination is actually the legacy of slavery. Mm-hmm. There would be no reason for how.
I would kind of disagree and say that us being in this society, period, is an issue. Because a group of people, they put us in a deficit through slavery. This is how they put us in the deficit, through slavery. So that's been a hindrance for us. They've been able to rule, right? Have dominance. So when we did try to do it on our own, through like Wall Street, which allowed for us to have cities and careers. They saw our success and they stifled it. They knocked it down. So now here we are in their grasp, where all money we make goes back to their society. They got the upper hand on a constant basis.
Housing discrimination, for redlining, if not for enslavement. That's what, the reason why it happened to begin with. That's the long echo of never having to deal with it to begin with. So, I mean, I focus on a particular portion of it, a particular portion of the legacy of white supremacy, but it's very tough in my mind to actually separate one from the other, in fact. And the way I wrote it, when I wrote the historical portion, I tried to write it as a continuum, as a continuum, not as a break, and then you had this and then you had that. The dominant feature in African-American life and African-American history in this country is unfreedom, is having less freedom than our fellow citizens. Mm-hmm. And you see that obviously in slavery in its most extreme. After enslavement, you lose, thank God, the right to sell people's children and put them on the auction block. But unfreedom is still there in the form of debt peonage, in the form of vagrancy laws where people are arrested and, put in prison and having to work. Douglas Blackman has that great book, Slavery by Another Name. And in housing discrimination, where you don't have a right to live where you want. And you're effectively crammed into, slums and, all these awful sort of things happen. So I saw it as a continuum, focusing on, a particular point. You're correct. I think the fact that folks are still alive and still around makes it particularly poignant. Mm-hmm. That I start not with some guy who died in 1890, but a guy who's right there living on, the west side of Chicago right now, mm-hmm. who was stolen from. I think that helps
So they took the skill set. And that's an important thing to a society thriving, to having a communist. They want to prevent us from being communists, which is important for us to get to because we started out communists. We didn't have this type of government. This type of government is witchery, it's trickery. It's trickery. And it's hiding a lot when they say democracy. There's more to that. Because at any time, the dominant society can take it back and become dictators with us, as they're trying to do, it looks like now.
The emotional power of it, but it's very hard for me to break it, in the periods like that.
This article is kind of hit like a bomb, and one of the things that I think is fascinating about the reaction to it, and the reaction I had to it as a reader, mm-hmm. is, and I don't want this to come out the wrong way, there's nothing new in there.
No.
It is synthesis, not
right.
uncovering new
right.
details.
Right.
It's not investigative reporting in that way. Mm-hmm. Why did you think that an article like this had to be written now? When you sent that email to your editor, I guess a year and a half
right.
ago, why did you think that there was need for an article that summed up what we knew
right.
about American racism?
I guess because we don't know, and by which I mean there are people who are experts in this field. There are people who write about American history. There are people who write sociology, who know. Okay, mm-hmm. who it's their job to know. There are considerably fewer journalists who know, and there are considerably fewer Americans who know, and that was clarified for me repeatedly in the kind of back and forth debates I would get into, about any old thing, with folks online. It was quite clear that there's a whole era. So one of the reasons why I chose Chicago is because Chicago had been in the news, as, sort of this epicenter of quote unquote black on black crime, and there'd been all this talk about murders, but the conversation was there was no question. Why do people live like this? How did this come to be to begin with? How did this situation actually transpire? I went to Chicago for the first time as an adult in 1995, and I was driving.
Ungodliness, not having direction, not lacking in self-knowledge, and energies. Energies is everything. Energies is everything. You got to think. When they had us back in slavery, they had us reproducing their way of reproducing, which wasn't a good way at all. Anything they do, they're going to cause destruction. So they had women mating with men that they did not wish to. We have deepness about us as a people. We have such a connection, a deepness that is so real out of this earth. with our emotions is powerful. So just imagine being a woman, being forced upon by a man that you have no connection with at all. No mental, no attraction, but you having to produce children with them. Nothing can come from that, but terror, but trauma. So what she's traumatized about gets passed down to her offspring. All the things that she's endured.
Down the Dan Ryan Express, at that time there was a stretch of projects, infamous projects. You know, the famous Robert Taylor Holmes. It occurred to me as an absolute monstrosity, and I thought of it as a moral monstrosity. It never occurred to me that somebody with specific attention to race and racism had plotted for people to live in that sort of way. You know what I mean? That, anybody who does any research on public housing in Chicago, that's exactly what happened. Public housing was put up on a segregated basis. But somehow, we've forgotten that. Or we want to forget it. I think you're right. It doesn't uncover anything new. It's a reminder, though, that, if you're going to go on television, you're going to talk about the murder rate in Chicago, or you're going to talk about, the shape of African-American families, or you're going to, stand up and lecture Black men about what they need to do. Never forget that you're talking to a community that has repeatedly gotten a raw deal in this country. Never forget that. Don't talk to these people like somehow the American government over the course of its history has been a friend to Black people in the Black community. We need to have some context here and be very, very clear about the conversation we've had over, the course of our existence. And that should inform the conversation that we're having now.
It seemed to me in that way that this article is actually kind of in dialogue with the article that I remember reading from you first was in The Atlantic. I think it might have been your first Atlantic piece about Bill Cosby and his kind of tour of making this case about sort of African-American culture and how it was behind a lot of problems that African-Americans were having. And through your writing, I think there's been a lot of engagement, particularly with President Obama, and his kind of arguments on this. And I feel like there's always been this part of your writing that is sort of arguing with this kind of scolding thread in sort of American discourse towards African Americans. And this seemed to me to kind of be about that and then turn around. That as opposed to being sort of reactive to that narrative, to be trying to set out a vision of what you thought the correct narrative actually was, to kind of set a different frame for that entire conversation. Did you think about it like that? I mean, how much did you see it as part of this procession?
I am vaguely aware that I am interested in certain things. And you can probably look at most of my magazine work in The Atlantic and just trace a thread, right? As you said, from that Cosby piece right to here. But I think the deeper thing, I can't think of the woman's name. You know this book, The Submerged State.
Yeah.
Suzanne Metzler. Suzanne Metzler. And, I've read pieces of it. I got to, give myself some time to just absorb that whole thing. But, this basic idea of how things that are done by, a state or by government somehow become the property of individuals. So it's very clear that housing as we know it today in America could not exist without government. It's just, this was not, people walking out, out into the wilds and then putting a pole down and saying, I'm going to build my house. It's very, very clear. Government's hand is all over it. And yet somehow in the iconography of what housing is, of what the suburbs is, it's seen as like an individual achievement. Buying into the American dream, you somehow individually achieve something. And so where we see the hand of government and where we see the power of individuals, and how those two things are conflated and confused is fascinating, to me, specifically to African Americans. If you say that African Americans have, an inferior culture, have, cultural pathologies that they're carrying with them, it seems to me you have to ask why that would be. Like, why would that, like my whole, beginning of, like where I start any argument when it comes to African Americans, when it comes to race, is that whatever action here makes sense. Now, it doesn't mean it's a good action. I want that, to be very clear here. It doesn't mean it's a good action. It doesn't mean it should be applauded, but that it makes sense, and it likely has something to do with something that's going on. So when you hear people say things like, "Well, you're just being irresponsible," why? Why would you be irresponsible? For instance, if you look at the rates of present fathers in the African American community, you can observe that maybe African American fathers are less present than, say, white fathers. Right? Let's just put that out there. The next question is, why would that be? Is it because African American fathers are irresponsible? Why? Why? On some level, I feel like in these conversations, we either have to get to actual historical processes, or we got to get to genetics.
Yeah.
One or the other, and we haven't totally rejected genetics, but I think mostly we have. So, in many ways, culture becomes like a cover for something else. What's actually happening? If you say an individual is not exercising, okay, so I understand that about my son, right? Like I understand that on a one-to-one basis. You can say Ta-Nehisi is not being responsible. Got it. When you're talking about thousands and millions of people, what is it about a community of millions that would make them less responsible? How can that be? What's going on there? So I've been, since that time over the past 6 years, just trying to dig at that as best I can.
What is going on is they have control and they're building their communism. But their communism now is threatened. Their communism is threatened at this moment.
What is the answer you'd give at this point? I mean, that's it. The way you frame that question is not the way it's framed in this article, and actually not really even the way I've seen it framed on your site. So if that's kind of the question animating it, what at this point is the answer?
Well, I think, there's part of me, because this is so rejected that I feel even stupid saying this. It's like when you have no consensus, you're out here by yourself saying, but, to me, it's pretty clear. I mean, the African American community is one of the oldest ethnic groups in this country. We've been here since 1619, okay? If you examine, an alien came to this country and said, okay, I'm going to do a thorough examination of what the policy, of, in the colonial times and the history of America also, what was the policy, of this country and its, ancestor colonies? That person would have to conclude that policy was one trying to ensure these people occupied a peon class, ensuring failure. When I approach it that way, when I think, that when I remember that the epoch, the period for which enslavement in this country lasted was 250 years. Freedom's only lasted 150 years, and that freedom has been really, really halting. For at least 100 of those years, you can question how much freedom it actually was. We have 50 years of kind of trying to fix 350 years of really, really immoral wrong. And you think of it that way, I'm not sure how it becomes much of a question. Like, it just seems like common sense. It's pretty clear. If I said, I'm going to spend 350 years mistreating a group of people, and in 50 years haltingly going back and forth, kind of trying to fix it, kind of not, or maybe I'll just, stop doing some of the worst stuff I was doing. Well, what would be your expectation for the socioeconomic indicators for that group of people? Looked at it from that perspective, I think African Americans are about exactly where we would expect them to be.
There's something in not just that answer, but in the article that I think until you wrote it this way that I'd not thought about. You said early on there that there's been a intentional policy of creating a peon class. And something I think you go through in the article, the hardest parts of the article to read are not about the monetary plunder. It's not people taking other people's wealth. There's an aridness to that, even if it's horrific. The hardest part of the article to read was about the breaking up of families. And at the top of the article, you get into something else, which I think is much more.
Now we break up our own families because we don't know how to go out and soul search and find and not have to find, but have guided towards us that man or woman that is for us. We don't know how to work the energies for us and not the energies that are working against us. We grasp a hold of those lower energies and push away our higher energies because we've been trained to do that. We've been trained for those things outside of us and not going within ourselves to know that we are truly, unbelievably something
important than I think even we really know how to talk about it. It's the idea that you can rely on the rule of law. The difference between an entrepreneur or a family who thinks they can rely on the rule of law and the state to protect them and to protect their business, and one who doesn't, right? We have this incredible lionization of risk takers. It's a hell of a lot easier to take risk if you believe your property is going to be protected if you get it. And that it's kind of the totality of that. What I thought was so stark in your piece was it's the totality of what got taken in terms of how that would make you think about how to operate in an economy or in your own life.
Right.
You know, I think something you do that's interesting is you don't really go into sort of what reparations would mean. And one of the things the piece convinced me is there almost is no way to repair some of this. That there just, you can't remake families you broke up 150 years ago. But it has to have some kind of effect.
Right. No, and I think there's a sociologist, and I'm blanking on his name. He's going to kill me for this. He wrote this book about Chicago, Great American City, that was very influential on my work. I'm so sorry I'm blanking on his name. It's the cameras. But we were having a discussion online, over email, about this culture thing. He had seen some of the debates I had, and he, wanted to engage, and we went back and forth. And knowing him as a sociologist, I wanted to make sure I was as sharp as I was. And he was talking about culture, and one of the things he was saying, like we were talking about, say, like the stop snitching thing, which was big for a moment. If you live within the community and you've experienced the police, for instance, if you know, like that, if you do in fact snitch, that there will be no protection for you, by the police. The police actually can't protect you. If you know that the police sometimes are not, always, the most law-abiding themselves, that creates a certain attitude that you then carry forth through authority. That's a very, very small example. What I ask people to think about when they, hear about like the contract loan situation I talk about in the article, when I ask them to think about people losing their homes and being evicted, it's not just the people who are being evicted. I asked them to think about the community around who watches that happen, who knows that this person works 3 jobs, the wife works 2 jobs, they got 3 kids they're really trying to take care of, and they got evicted. And you're a 15-year-old kid, you're struggling with school, you're having whatever issues a 15-year-old kid, might have, and you see that happening in your community. There's a message being sent about, what the social contract is between you and this country. And then there's a whole other world that you see, I'm talking personally here, that you see when you cut on the TV. And you know that somewhere out there, people aren't living like you're living. It's just you. It's just you. That got to leave you feeling a certain way about your country.
Why did you do this as an article, not a book?
That's a good question. Well, I work for The Atlantic.
A lot of people work for The Atlantic. They write books, not articles.
Well, the thing is this. I thought it would have much more impact. First of all, I think the cover of The Atlantic, and specifically the cover they designed, actually, I hate to say this, but books get ignored all the time. The cover space of The Atlantic, it may be, in terms of, the world of ideas, it may be the most valuable in all the magazines, which is not to say there aren't other magazines that do great articles, but The Atlantic is one of the last ones that really just puts its ideas out front and has a certain heritage and cachet. So, for the magazine that I work for, to say, yeah, we should talk about reparations, that's going to attract some attention, So that was the main reason. And also, I adore my editors at The Atlantic. I just absolutely adore them. And after the last, really big piece I did for them, the only message I got back was, go out there. Go out there. As long as you can substantiate it, go out there, find something for us. Find something, big, some big idea. So.
What was, on the other side of that question, you run a blog. Actually, and I think it's like, and I actually mean that like sort of in the old sense, right? Like,
although less and less every day is so funny.
Maybe that's right.
But
like,
no, I hear what you're saying.
The blogging used to kind of mean a kind of writing, right? It had a voice, and it was in conversation with your readers. And a lot of people who began as bloggers, myself included, have kind of like moved into these other places where it's merged much more with other kinds of writing, where it has more institutional voice, where it is kind of more about the next article as opposed to the ongoing conversation.
Right.
And your blog, I think, is arguably the best example, like an ongoing conversation with readers that exists anywhere on the internet. And I'm curious kind of the role that the blog played in this piece, because I think that the sort of traditional view of bloggers is that they can't even think long. And yet it felt to me like, you could see this piece coming together week by week on the blog. I mean, there was a sense of recognition reading it, sort of understanding how all these different things I'd read and these different conversations you were starting were sort of being woven together into the whole.
Yeah, no. Since I started blogging in January 2008, that's largely been true. It is a I mean, it's an online, it's a blog. It's what it says it is. It's a a log, on the World Wide Web of my thinking that's interactive. It played a big role because first of all, like you just had this notebook where you can just write, okay, this is what I'm thinking. I write this, and here's what I'm taking from it, right? But then I'm lucky enough that I have like graduate students and historians and sociologists themselves who will then write in.
Mm-hmm.
So I might just make the rest of this to part 2 because I have some things to do today. So I might just come back later on tonight and finish this conversation here, and finish out our capability to own and profit. Is hindered because of their practice of communism. You have to look at Germany in World War II, in the 1930s. You have to look at how part of that society was living like we were, just like we were, during Wall Street, Black Wall Street, Nubian Wall Street, because Black is actually white, so Nubian Wall Street. So we don't want to continue allowing switchery to take its place. We want to cut it off at the knees and prevent the switchery because they are not us and we are not them. So we want to make it clear when we're speaking, because when we're speaking, we're casting spells. So we don't want to cast any bad spells upon ourselves. So the same thing, they practice communism. They practice communism. So anyone that's practicing communism is a threat to Neanderthal. So even though their days are shortening and their time here on Earth diminishing, they are fighting like hell to survive and feeding us illusions and lies to get there. So what we have to do is we have to gather self-knowledge. It's important that we gather self-knowledge. I mean that deep self-knowledge to question why. Why did they give us religion? Why did they tarnish our tongue? Why did they strip of us of our culture? Why were we considered pagans? Which I think being a pagan is a good thing. I'm proud of it. It's a people. There's nothing wrong with it. Why did they say that that Tomorrow was a bad place with bad people? When it was Rome, when it was Greece, when it was Asia, when it was the continent, motherland, when it was America. Lies, manipulation, switchery. We have to question ourselves and think very deep, meditate, and know. So with that said, family, I'm going to set up part 2 to this, and we're going to complete listening to Tanishi. Tanishi, I love his name, talking about this very important subject here. So with that said, family, thank you, Donnie. Thank you, people in the clouds. With that said, true love, real peace, the higher self within the soul. Till next time, peace.